Hello, everyone. Welcome to Truth Proof. Another Thursday. How are you, Les? All good?
Well, we're pretty good out here in the hot tropics of the UK. Always
Hot
great.
tropics. I've been in garden. I've been doing a little bit in garden, so it's caught my face. Don't take much, but I've had a great week, and I'm sure you've been the same. So, we've got 14,000 subscribers, which is good. Thank you guys for pressing the like and subscribe. And absolutely brilliant.
And I'm sure after tonight's show, we'll probably we'll get some
15.
more subscribers. Yeah, please do subscribe if you like tonight's show, because we've got a great guest on. But before we get to the guest, let's see who's in the chat, Paul.
Absolutely. Then we've got Chris Mack, I think. Let's have a look. Liam Zeno, Mike Disabled Welshman, Denise Fox, Awake, Stargaze Returnal, Lee's in Rivington, and Pike Beast, Jack, 1948, Doc Sausage, Steve Colling, Auntie Mo, Richard Mason. Let's have a look. Nuki Brown and Bob. I don't know if it's Bob Brown, but we've got Bob in anyway. So good to see you, Bob. I think Linny's in. I thought I saw his name earlier. Mrs. Linny, Mia Girl. I don't know whether my wife's in. She might put an appearance in before Emmerdale Farm. Probably that tells me a lot, doesn't it? And
yep. And don't forget,
Jojo.
If you've got any questions, folks, we'll be doing questions around about 8 o'clock time.
Unless there's anything really relevant, then, Les, if you think there is, you'll just jump in whenever you want. But like you said, we've got a great guest tonight in LaRae Wilkins, and an alternative viewpoint to the people that believe that the aliens or these visitors, wherever they're from, we're not saying outer space, wherever they're from, it's not all love and light. And as I said in Night People, no love and light, just scars in the night. So we're gonna hear the true agenda. And this lady's devoted her life really to revealing the true agenda of alien visitation. So let's bring LaRae on, Les.
Oops, she came on.
Hello, LaRae. Great to see you.
Good to see you, my friend. How are you? Hello,
I'm
Les.
very good, thank you. And
I'm good.
Les, we shall see you around 8 o'clock. Unless you think there's a question that's relevant, just punch back in with it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and enjoy the show, guys.
Will do. Great to see you, LaRae, and thank you for agreeing to come on, because you don't really do many of these, do you? If any?
No.
No.
It's not about me. I'm about getting the word out, but I usually do that behind the scenes.
Absolutely, and I think a lot of people, there'll be some in chat now who will be familiar with you when we go to conferences here in UK, and you're the lady that's there actually giving the word out. You're giving the books away, and that's a rare thing, because before we jump into the in-depth questions, how did you get here? How did you get to this stage where you're devoting everything to this alien presence and what they're about?
Okay, first, before I start, I just want to say that I'm not speaking officially for any of the organizations involved in this. This is my experience as a student and as someone who has studied this for a very long time. I want to clear that up right away. This is my experience as a student. I'm not speaking officially in any manner. So that's what. So it actually started out with I was searching for warm, fluffy spirituality. I had gone through a lot of different ones, and nothing was ever deep enough. And I fully admit that my motive at the time was extremely selfish. I was trying to jettison myself out of here and discover enlightenment, like the Buddha did. I cringe when I think about that now. And so I had read a long time ago that if you are around someone who's experienced enlightenment, you absorb some of their energy. And as much as it pains me now, I have to be honest, I was literally looking for someone to leech off of. So one night I was feeling sorry for myself, and I just did this search for enlightened.com. Or no, just a search for someone who was enlightened now, right? That I could go leech off of. Oh God, it just kills me. And I came across this man named Marshall Summers. And to be fair, I didn't believe a word it said, but it had a meditation practice called the Steps to Knowledge. And man, I was after that practice. I was after that meditation practice because, again, I'm just trying to shoot off out of here. And so I started doing steps right away. And then I gradually started looking into the rest of Marshall's material. And I mostly concentrated on just the warm, fluffy stuff at first.
Yeah.
But a big part of it was also about humanity being on the threshold of entering a universe full of intelligent life. And even though I had been interested in UFOs since I was a kid, I saw one when I was 12. I was always 100% convinced they were real. It was obvious. I watched everything I could watch on it. That really wasn't where my heart was. My heart was with, the spiritual stuff.
Yeah.
And then part of Marshall's message was another. So he has this great big message that's about the future for humanity and preparing us so that we can deal with what's going to be a difficult future. And then he received another communication called the Allies of Humanity. And to be fair, I was just sort of staying away from that. The first time I heard people talking about it, I'm like, what are these people on? So I didn't come to this with the most open of minds, at least that section of it. But as time went on, I genuinely started to change from the spiritual work. I was healing. I was becoming stronger. My relationships were healing. I was less angry. I switched from just being completely self-centered to wanting to be of service to the world. And at some point, I realized that if I was really having these genuine experiences with Marshall's work, that meant I had better take a look at the Allies material. I needed to start taking that seriously. And so I started looking at it, and I didn't like what I saw at all. My first reaction to it was to throw it. I wanted to throw it across the room
because it wasn't the truth that you perceived.
It wasn't what I wanted to hear.
No.
Right? I had, like a lot of people do, we put a lot of hope that these beings are here for our benefit. We really, they've got to be here for our good. We just assume that because they have advanced technology, that means they're advanced spiritually. And Allies was not saying that. Allies was not saying that at all. So I never take anything at just face value. So I'm like, okay, I'm having this powerful experience with my spiritual work. So that means I have to look at this, and I don't just believe it. I never just believe anything. I've got to dig. Okay. Yeah. So I took the information in Allies. It was what I didn't want to hear. And I started to reverse engineer it to see if there was evidence of what they were saying in the world.
Right.
And a lot of stuff I had never heard of. They spoke of there being a pacification program.
That would have question. Yeah. Tell us a little bit about that. But before we get to that, because you're talking about allies, this is the message that Marshall's being given. Yeah.
Yeah. He received that from, allegedly, I'm saying allegedly, not for my sake. I'm convinced they're real, but for the sake of your audience. From a group of beings who were sent to spy on the beings that we're interacting with now. Okay, so he had received this tremendous spiritual training and was asked to receive the Allies briefings, which is two different sources. The first one was, the best I can say, is an angelic source. And then the Allies were from actual physical beings. Who had spied on those that were here, that know what life in the universe is about, and this really gets me, who value humanity. Right. They value us simply because we appreciate freedom. They value us because the human heart and spirit is still alive in our world. So you have all these other races telling us how awful we are and we can't manage ourselves. And here are the Allies, who's not asking us for anything, telling us you're a very promising race. And we would like to see you get through this difficult threshold of having to deal with this complicated universe successfully. And so they gave us the information of what we would have to do and what was happening.
So the visitation will have been going on throughout man's evolution, but when did the intervention then begin?
Okay. So yes, the Marshall's other work in the book Life in the Universe goes into how humanity has been visited over its lifetime, over long, even before we got here. And this world is such a rare, beautiful gem in a universe that's just full of barren worlds. So other races would come here and they would take plants, they would take minerals, they would use it as a storehouse. They would use our world to seed life elsewhere. You know, one of the things the Allies teaches us is that all life requires life-sustaining resources. So, you know, so yes, there were encounters with you know, other humans, but we were too tribal to be able to colonize or be useful. All right, so the real intervention, I'd say, really started around the Industrial Revolution, as we started to get electricity and so forth. So we were getting stronger. We were starting to become more global gradually. But the real kicker was dropping the bombs.
The bomb. That was going to be what I was going to say after the bomb.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a game changer, do you
Yeah, that was when, okay, so in the Allies, we learned that our world is very rare, it's very precious, and it is highly coveted in our local galaxy. And we're a race that knows nothing about life out there, so we're going to be very easy to take advantage of. So that's what we learn in the Allies. And so when the bomb went off, they saw we were getting stronger and we were starting to harm the prize that they seek so badly. So what happened? 1947, we had the Roswell crash, didn't we? And a lot of people don't associate it, but if you really look at what's happened since the 1940s, we've slowly gone backwards ever since they got here in all sorts of ways. And the Allies tells us that that is the influence of these beings.
So we've come forward with technology, but have we gone backwards as in our...
Well, if you think about the 1940s, right? All right, we had just defeated Hitler. The world had come together. The world had united to do that, right? And then Roswell happened. And all right, so yeah, I mean, obviously the powers that be wanted that tech for weapons. I mean, that's, you know, the stage of evolution we were at. However, we had just gotten the NHS through, we had gotten Social Security, we were starting to, okay, we're finally making a little bit of progress on race relations and so forth. Had a long way to go back in the 40s, but we were gradually getting it, we were starting to take care of each other, and we were having a more compassionate society, and not perfect.
We're dividing again.
Well, yeah, and so since then, though, since their presence here, what happened? In great book, the Presidents and UFOs by Larry Holcomb, he goes into the fact 1947, literally, Roswell happened in July. Allegedly, Truman formed the Majestic 12 in September. They started coming up with all these secret agencies. Gore Vidal, who's an incredible writer and historian, marked that time period as when America really started to go backwards. Our education system started to go backwards. I'm telling you, and my family was born in the 1910s, my father and such, and they had education in the middle of nowhere, Appalachia. You know, they were teaching Shakespeare. My father was fantastic with poetry and that sort of thing. And since then, though, it's more, you know, we're educated to be good little citizens, right? And to be smart enough, but not too smart. Education used to be free, and in the 80s that changed. Everybody had to start paying for it. So it takes time to really see it, because these beings are working on a very slow, gradual, long-term undermining of humanity. And they deliberately focused on Russia and the United States to try and weaken them. So they made sure we got involved in intractable conflicts. So, you know, America just made this great big military industrial complex. wars around the world. The economy is based on the defense industry, and we've just gotten weaker and weaker over time until now. I mean, people can't even talk to each other civilly anymore. It's really fascinating.
But surely, LaRae, if we're at conflict if we're building weapons of mass destruction, America, Russia, surely it's defeating the object of this jewel of a planet. Potentially, we can destroy it. We can destroy it. They're aiding us to our own destruction. Then.
Well, yeah. I mean, they don't want the planet harmed, but the more wars we have, the weaker we become, the more divided we become. And if you go back in history and you look at what colonizers do, first they started with trade, and then they send in the missionaries to, make all these promises and just gradually take over the other cultures, right? And they need us. They need us as a workforce. So we're happily destroying ourselves. We're running out of resources. They're encouraging that. They're encouraging that so that we can become dependent upon their technology eventually. And look at people like Greer. What are they going on about? Oh yeah, free energy. Was anything really free, Paul? Is anything in the universe free?
So your message really is the opposite to Greer. And
totally.
So do you think then that not just the population, but governments were all being lied to on a monumental scale?
Okay, I'll tell you the four things that allies talk about where the alien beings have been intervening for quite some time behind the scenes. Number one, they're influencing governments, all of them. They're using their tech. They've made if the story about Eisenhower is true, they were making deals behind the scenes back in the 50s. So they undermine our governments to turn people against their governments. Well, that's working really well, isn't it? They use religion, and look how religion has become anti-religion in the last 50 years. It's now about control, and they're influencing a lot of the religions behind the scenes, making promises about, oh, we'll take your religion out into the universe. But the one that's really, really obvious to my mind is the way they have made promises with economic powers, because economic powers really don't have a lot of scruples, right? So they've been behind the scenes. Look at all the billionaires that we've gotten in the last, few years, and they've been promised more power, more money, and they can just give them a little piece of technology and it'll make them a fortune. When you and I were growing up, we didn't have these monopolies like we have now. We didn't have all that wealth accumulated at the top.
So it's not a trick question or anything, but how do we know it's them? How do you saying they can give them this, they can give them that? And
all right, well, that's where people have to use their own discernment, right? So I, remember, I came at this from quite a hostile place. But look at how they're able to control minds. All right, they can make screen memories in people that they've abducted. You've experienced how they've wiped your memory out. A lot of people will be like, say, there's a UFO in front of them. Their normal state would be to take a picture of them, and suddenly they have a camera in their pocket, and it doesn't even occur to them to turn it on. So if you're behind the scenes and you've got that level of mind control, how difficult, and how many unfortunately, would our politicians go for, more power, more money? It's not that easy. It's not that difficult to, let greed do its thing on its own. But you can't. That's something people have to discern. I put it in a way that you can sense the darkness in the world, and you can sense how governments have changed. It used to be the government was there for the people, and now it's almost like the governments are working against people. So you have to put that together yourself.
But when you say they wipe memory, if I'm only looking at night people and my own experiences, and I know what you meant then actually when you said I take it you're talking about a section in the Night People, the wedding album people. And if people who haven't read Night People, basically, I woke up as a child, and there's these beings that they're at the bottom of the bed. And what a difficult thing, what a weird thing to say at 62-year-old. You're telling, you're kind of bearing your soul to people, and because there'll be people here who've never seen or experienced stuff like that, they're going to go, what is he on? But that's what it were like. They were at the bottom of the bed, these beings, alien beings. And I always make a point to say, not necessarily from outer space. They were alien beings, alien to everything I know and understand. Turned away, buried my head in the covers for what seemed like ages. It was probably just a minute. Turned back, and they were a row of people from my mum and dad's wedding album.
Precisely.
Did not. They knew. I don't know how, but well, I do, because we've not got next to note in our house. No books really, but they were a wedding album, and I remember looking at it, and it was just like a carbon copy of looking at people from wedding album. And it was almost like they'd picked through your mind.
Oh, what they can do with mind control is scary. It's very scary. I mean, David Jacobs goes into a lot of detail in his books about, people's memories being erased or a false memory implanted, but he was able to break through through hypnosis to what actually happened, and it just kept being the same thing. People were taken, they would have these horrible procedures performed on them, and they would know nothing about it the next day, or they would have just slight memories. I mean, you've even had your experience where it said, there's basically most people forget, but you didn't. Remember that Mr. and Mrs. Tick telling you that, right? So there are people that have stronger minds, but you think about it, weaker minds can be influenced by stronger minds. And what these beings have, according to the allies, is very strong focus, where our brains are scattered. They're just, one thing to the next. We're not very good at paying attention. We're not that difficult to manipulate. Yeah. Some of us are stronger than others. I went for the love and light stuff for a long time.
Well, I know that when I woke up with the holes in my back, if Mary hadn't have seen them when I was sat on edge of bed, I don't mean they'd have gone away. Those holes would have still been there. But I think even the fragments of memories that are retained, they were like almost falling out at the back of my head. There was so much more that happened that I can't remember.
Exactly.
But then,
and what right do they have to do that? I mean, if this were a person committing any of these things, whether it's influencing the government or the elite or they'd be in jail. They come and break into your house and take your kid at 3 o'clock in the morning. That is punishable by time in prison. And yet, how many thousands and thousands of people who are convinced of the love and light narrative, and that's part of the pacification, I haven't gone into that yet, but how many people that are convinced of the love and light narrative that somehow will justify this, no matter what they do? It boggles my mind.
What? Because I've not really thought about it. What is the justification for it in their mind?
Okay, so
the people that think it's okay, let's assume Paul Sinclair's telling truth, and thousands of people around the world are telling truth, and they've had some kind of contact with these beings, and it's not been good. What is the justification for the people that think this is all wonderful?
Well, because of how aliens make them feel, right? Which is no more than pushing a dopamine button in your brain, probably. And they get overwhelmed sometimes. A lot of the contactees, they feel a lot of love, but that is just a part of what they can do to us, right? So I was telling you yesterday how which researcher was it? I can't remember which researcher it was, but an alien. Oh, it was Bud Hopkins. So this woman was on a table. She was mad. She was hurting. She was angry. She couldn't stand these beings. And then suddenly the alien put his hand on her forehead. And this is the most wonderful being in the world. She thought he was wonderful, just nothing but love, profound love. Then takes his hand away. The pain and the anger come back. That is pure manipulation. And also, people, they're having these experiences, they can't control it. Their mind needs it to be good, Paul. You know, I get that.
Well,
I
we
get
do.
that because this is scary.
Yeah. It's almost like life after death, and we're hoping for. There's not an happy outcome for death, is there? But we're hoping for something wonderful after that, and obviously none of us know, do we? We don't know.
Oh, I can tell you more about that if you ever if you like, but that's a different show. Because that's actually talked about in the other half of Marshall's work, that yes, there is life after death, and it's great, and there's no judgment or hell or any of that nonsense, but we won't go there now.
Okay. So let's just, I don't mean we'll stay with Roswell, but Roswell and other gifts of technology, should we say, that have come to us, are they Trojan horses? Is the information and the technology that we're being imparted, is it to steer us in a certain direction?
Oh, absolutely. Well, if you think about it, I like to go all the way back to the 1950s. Now, I'm not saying that aliens are responsible for television. I'm not saying that. However, if you just go back and look at life prior to Roswell, people went to dances, they went to live music, they went to theater. People had community. They had church, they got together, they had dinners. And then television came in. And what did they call television? They called it programming right from the beginning. Well, if you can get people to pay attention to something for long enough, and they hear it again and again and again, that becomes a form of social conditioning. So that television was used to, sort of pacify people, get them to buy things. They were being manipulated with TV. And then we got computers. Right. And so all of these things have gradually, now we've got phones that none of us can even look up or take our earphones out to talk to another human being. So it's divided us, not just, on between countries or anything else. It's divided us from each other. Yeah. And and then now you have AI on top of that. And all of that can be manipulated by the aliens. That's another thing they were waiting for, is for us to have a world where there was global communication, that there was this infrastructure. They don't want to destroy us. They want us as a workforce. Okay. So now, we're constantly, people know, they know where we are. We've got things coming into our brains all the time. People can't sit still for 5 seconds. There's no peace.
No.
It's just people, and that's what you need to develop in order to be able to pay attention to what they're doing. And we are distracted. We are completely distracted.
The mind is constantly active, and so is it a spiritual thing then, that a road that you're going down then, LaRae? Because do we have to find that peace before we can really see the bigger picture?
Well, no, I think, again, people, the Allies is there. And by the way, everything I talk about is available free online. There's no gatekeeping. There's no firewalls. It's available for the world to read. It's being translated into 30, 40 languages as we speak. So this information is there for people to have their own experience of, right? And to see what they think, put it together for themselves. Now, the good news about what the Allies tell us is what we have to do. First of all, humanity has to wake up that this is even happening. Well, most people don't even think they're real. I mean, look, and then the government has played, forgive my language, silly buggers for all these years to keep us distracted and mock the subject. And then you've got, how we have evolved to be the apex predator, and the collective human ego is going to take a long time to adjust to the fact that we're not top of the totem pole. And that's why you get a lot of people demanding proof and fear. It's a lot of fear regarding that. But the good news about the Allies and the rest of Marshall's work, it goes into depth about what humanity can do to prevent them from colonizing us. So it gives us the information, but leaves all the decision making up to us. Nobody's coming to save us. We have to make the decision. And it's also about strengthening people from the inside out with their own deeper intelligence. it's like a guiding force that people have that we're not used to listening to, but everybody's experienced, gut feelings, intuition, where, your body will tell you, don't do that. You'll have some sort of warning, but you'll do it anyway. But that's just a very weak form of it. But the rest of Marshall's work is about how we can develop that and how we can become a society and a world that maintains its freedom, its self-determination, how we can be better than what we have been in the past. But it's all our choice. It's a choice of each individual.
But the path, so we've taken in what you've said, but so the path that we're on now with mobile phones, with technology, with everything that's occupying us as a collective, across the globe, how does, and I'm not saying you can't, or yourself, I know you're speaking your views only during this podcast. How do you get that message out then to the wider population? Because I'm not saying that it's not worth listening to. I'm just saying, but nobody's going to listen because everybody's too distracted.
Well, the good news is, if this work is correct, it doesn't take that many of us. Okay, we only need about 1 to 2%, about 2% of the population eventually. To see it, and it's up to each individual how deep they want to go, or not at all. But if enough people can feel the truth about what's happening and take this into their lives, we have the power to expel them simply by coming together and ordering them out. But first we got to convince people they're real. And that's why I've given away about over 3,000 books. That's why I'm so keen to talk about it and to let people know the information is there, free for them to explore, should they so choose. But you're right; it's a very difficult thing in this day and age because our attention spans are so short, and it also isn't a message they want to hear.
No, and the people holding the power are the ones that are reaping in the wealth and accumulating the fortunes. They're not going to want to run with your narrative.
No, actually, it's really interesting, and that's not just true now. That's been true throughout history, according to Marshall's work. In that, religion or spirituality would come into the world quite pure, but then mankind would get a hold of it and use it and manipulate people with it and cause fear and hell and threats and get rich on it and that sort of thing. But again, this is up to us. And this is what I love about the Allies. The Allies have given us disclosure, and they trust ordinary people with this information. This is not going to, now I do hope, and I think that there may be sanctions that have taken the Allies' message on board, right, within government. It's not going to be many. This is my guess. It's been out there for a while. So, I'm hoping that somewhere it's being taken seriously. But no, this is going to be up to us. This is down to we the people, we the people of the entire world.
So obviously you're putting the word out as you see it, and Marshall is. But what would it take? Do you need more from the Allies in order to get this message out, or do you think what they've given you the tools to work with?
They've given us. Listen, it's taken Marshall 40 years to bring this into the world, right? I mean, you can see, and this isn't even all of them, but there's a bunch of these books that Marshall has received over the 40-something years he's been doing this. So the information is in the world. It's just, again, getting that word out. But I think the Allies have given us enough that if enough people take it into their hearts and really study it and learn it, then, but it's all going to come through one-on-one communication, people tuning into your podcast or whoever else, because, it's not just me that talks about it. There's a lot of us.
So the darker side of this, then, the beings that are interacting with people, what examples have you? Any examples that you can give us?
Woo! How many do you want? Okay, well, I'll tell you what the Allies say they want the world for. It's not just, it's not just water and oxygen and all the other life-sustaining things on Earth, right? They want plants because all living beings need to eat, right? They all need medicine. They all need, so what they're doing, I mean, you can, and we have examples of this in the world with, take Linda Moulton Howe's work, or anybody, you've studied them, what they do to animals, all these, and people, they've done it too as well.
Absolutely, yeah.
So in Allies of Humanity, Book 2, Chapter 5, there's a whole chapter that's called What They Want, okay? And so this is where I put the allies together. So they're saying that they want the biological materials of Earth, blood, plasma, organs, DNA, because that can be taken and turned into all kinds of life out there. So I have to look into the world and say, where's the evidence of that? Well, all these animal carcasses don't have a single drop of blood. You see what I'm saying? So they don't have any, you know, and much of the time they've taken their organs out, they've taken the genitals. And so that to me verifies what the allies are talking about. But they look at us as a resource like that too. You know, it's very similar. It's dark. I mean, it's dark.
And
they don't have any regard for us.
And do you think then that the abductions are just as prolific today, 2025, as what they were in the 60s and 70s?
More so, and they're better at it. They're better at it. See, when you and there's a new fellow on the scene by the name of Chris O'Leary, who was also started being abducted in the 60s, his mother in the 50s. I think they've just gotten better at their mind control because so many people are coming back with the, oh, my experience was positive. You know, well, what does that mean? You know, what did they do to you? Why? And then I even had an experience on TikTok recently. This guy was arguing with me right, left, and center that he was getting taken and life was great and he had plenty of money and he was happy. And then he came back, and then he said he was scared. He was scared. They showed him another version of himself.
All right.
He had been
replicated. Yeah.
Right, and that they go. Carla Turner goes into that in Masquerade of Angels as well. And then the hybrid program is farther along now than it was back then. If you read David Jacobs and Bud Hopkins and Carla Turner, the hybridization program, see, they're, according to the allies and to some of Marshall's other work, you see, they can't live here. They can't live in our biologically diverse world. They live on ships in sterile environments, under the water, under the ground. And the biological contamination, even with all their advanced tech, is still a very, very big thing, right? So they need to, that's why they've bred with us, to get a combination of human and them that looks like us, but is loyal to them. And they are putting them in place to be the eventual leaders of humanity, which is pretty scary because these beings, they don't have any warmth. They don't have any compassion for each other. They don't, it's all about doing as they're told.
Almost like an ant colony.
That's very much what it is. And each one has its designated role. If you read Jacob's work, each one has its designated role, its hierarchy. Nobody goes outside of that. And I think that that program is a lot more advanced than it was. And it's now a lot more difficult.
So you would
discern.
definitely say that the abduction scenario, they're still taking place? Because I've heard lots of people recently, and you don't have to repeat yourself because I know that's what you've said, just saying, like, oh, nobody talks about abductions anymore. They seem to have dropped off. But your alternative view, or your view, is that they are taking place, but they've just become more skillful at the craft of or whatever they're doing.
All right. Well, they've had several generations. You know, Ingo Swann was talking about running into a hybrid in the 90s. And, you know, Betty and Barney Hill, they were taken in the 60s. So they've had a couple of generations to improve them, you know, and Jacob's work goes into how the kids are raised on their ships, and then the people they were abducting were then training them on how to be human, because things that are so natural to us, they don't understand at all. Well, at least then. I think they're probably a lot better now. But
So
they didn't understand why we would change our clothes. You know, if we went to a nice restaurant or if we went to McDonald's, they didn't know why we would do that. And they didn't understand what music was about.
So the people that were being abducted were then being indoctrinated onto the ship to teach the hybrids. So some people wouldn't have had. So then that means that some people, you know, are residing on planet Earth who weren't necessarily wanting to be abducted suddenly found themselves thrust into that
role, and the aliens would make them do what they didn't want to do, but they didn't have a choice, because that's how powerful their mind control is.
I see. Honestly, it is an alternative view, isn't it? And I'm going to pull Les in for some questions in a minute, if we've got any. If that's, I went a bit earlier than normal, Les, but
yeah, no worries. We've got some good questions in
stacking up. So you don't mind, LaRae, do you?
Not at all.
Okay, then we'll start off with Steve Collin is saying, LaRae, but why us as a race of people when these beings could pick and choose whatever planet they want? They choose us. I don't get it.
Okay, the reason they've chosen us, number one, we don't know anything about life in the universe. We are complete, because life out there is just like life here. It's competitive and it's difficult. That's one. Number two, planets like Earth are extremely rare, right? It's like maybe 1 in 10 or 20,000 planets, and they're occupied, and they're going to be occupied by races that know a lot more about life in the universe than we do. So we are still those gullible natives that are very welcoming of strangers. Okay. Number three, while we like to imagine they can travel anywhere, they can't. These beings, according to the new message in the Allies, they are from our local galaxy, because they cannot control worlds that far away. So we are in a strategic position, number one. And number two, we have what they need. And now think about this. We have said throughout our history that when we run out of resources here, we're going to go to other worlds to get them. Well, in technologically advanced worlds, according to the Allies, they have run out of their own natural resources, just like we're running out of here. So they have to enter these really complex trade agreements, trade routes, and we're lucky there because we're in a very civilized section of the universe. But we are, a young emerging race. We don't know anything, and we're extremely easy to take advantage of. So that would be my answer.
Thank you.
Okay, and I've just got a little point to make myself, actually. When you and Paul were talking about, Paul was saying he didn't hear of many abductions these days as compared to the 1990s. Now, I picked up on a good article, and no doubt a few people in the chat will have read it. Jack Valley went to the press and said he has abduction cases where they've resulted in death. And
yep.
And he's got documents to prove what he's saying. So, I mean, and this is South America. Now, I've noticed myself, and other people have noticed, a lot more gruesome things seems to happen to people in South America. I don't know why that is. Have you got any thoughts on that, LaRae?
Well, perhaps they don't have as many cameras around the place, and there's a lot of people that don't have family around them. They care about I can't answer that because Corrales took place there. Maybe, we're more sophisticated in the West as far as our education, our CCTV is, as we all know, in the UK. And going back to what you say about the deaths, there's a wonderful video by Butch Witowski where he goes into detail about how, say, 250,000, and this was back in the 2000s, early 2000s, that 250,000 people a year disappear. 95% of them can be accounted for in Grass is Greener, Teenage Runaways, whatever.
Yeah.
But 30,000, and this is just the countries that report it. There's a lot of countries that don't. 30,000 people a year are disappearing completely without a trace. And then you go and you watch David Paulides missing 411 and people missing out of the parks. There's some, you know, and it also says in the Allies that some people that are taken won't be coming back, and they are treated very, very badly.
Thank you.
It's dark, guys. It is dark, you know. But we need to see it for what it is. If that is what's happening, my personal view is treat it as though they are colonizers and they want this place and they are doing these things, rather than just welcome them in willy-nilly without knowing what their agenda is. They've been here for 100 years. When have they ever said this is what we're doing? If you read, there's a new guy doing abductions called Andy Russell, wrote a wonderful book called Testimony. He's in the UK. It's about abductions in the UK.
Really?
Yeah, and he said that, oh, I just lost it. Sorry.
Andy Russell. Yeah, Andy Russell with abductions in the UK.
Yeah.
Just lost the thread there, though, haven't you?
I did. No, it's gone. Sorry. What was the question you were? Oh, so. Well, I can't remember. Sorry. That does happen to me. I apologize.
It'll come back to you. It's not a problem. It happens to me all the time. Next question, Les.
Yeah. Well, I just want to get this one in. Actually, I picked up on what you said earlier, LaRae, and you said it's the choice of the individual. That was your. I'll quote you on that one. It was the choice of the individual to know and you know and learn about this infiltration of these bad entities or what have you.
Right.
And yeah. And so where does then the collective part of the humanity come in, the human race? If we're looking at individual, I could say, oh, well, I've just listened to LaRae and I understand that there's some bad players out there. But what do I do with that information?
Well, first thing is, educate yourself, you know, see it for what it is, you know, put it together for yourself and then share it. Right. I just last year I retired, but I was able to tell well over several thousand people about this because of the nature of my work, because they were trapped with me, bless them. And what we have to do now is plant the seeds. OK, because this, in my view, will become more and more apparent over time. And somebody's got to be first. Nobody ever listens to the ones that are first, do they? But over time, it's, you know, like people that I would talk to, I would, you know, explain it to them, and they knew what I was talking about when I said the darkness in the world. And then something's going to happen to them. They're going to say, wait a minute, that crazy woman that took us down to the airport, you know, didn't she say something about that? We now have the Pentagon admitting something's here. And then those that choose to take it further and develop that spiritual power, this is how it will get out. It's person to person. And, you know, you having an experience of it, if you choose to, and then you sharing it with another, and then another, and so forth. That's how it's going to work. I mean, to be fair, I'm happy to report, although we're still very small, there's people studying this in 92 countries around the world. People in colonized countries really get it. They get it really fast. As soon as you say, what happens when something with better technology turns up? They say they're here to loot. You know, they get that in 5 minutes. I was talking to an Indian, a Native American, who was the chief of his tribe in where I'm from in Appalachia. I told him, bingo, 5 seconds flat. He understood it. So that's how it's going to travel. And we have the opportunity now with the internet as well.
Yeah, well, that can be a help or a hindrance, I think, LaRae, because we're faced with this bombardment of propaganda from mainstream press on a daily basis. You can see it now, the Sun headlines, I was abducted by, you know, and it's just a mockery. And I think this is what the general public are fighting. They've got to fight against.
So
they
then,
do. They do. And I have no doubt that the mockery is, you see, if they are influencing the elites, then they're influencing the people that own the papers and the media, aren't they? to keep the mystery going. And then there's also those of us that are in ufology that just want to keep the mystery going, and we don't want to know what it is. But we got to start putting this together. But yeah, we are up against some very powerful forces, Les. I don't deny that. But
I'm glad that you said that you're in early stages, with this, where, and the people on the first rungs of the ladder are the ones that aren't believed, and it'll slowly grow. Because what Les said is, he made a good point, I think, because as soon as somebody comes out and says something that's maybe it could be true, it's profound, it's happened to them, and then the papers just crush them and ridicule them. Well, so you're up against it from all angles, aren't you?
Yeah, and just before you answer that, LaRae, I think Paul's had he could have been on the other end of the receiving end of this, because you've been approached by media, Paul, in the past.
Many times.
I remember you telling me, yeah. And I've said to you, what was the advice I give to you? Are you sure they don't want to twist this into something that's going to make it like a bull?
I've stepped away from it. You know this, LaRae. Les knows it. Loads of people in chat know it, and people who will be listening to this afterwards. There are people within this subject that just thrive on saying, "Oh, we're in this newspaper now. We're in this newspaper," and like it's not doing us any good. Half of the time, we're just meant to look like idiots, because the subject is fringe. The things that we're talking about are absolutely off the scale. I mean, like I just said to you earlier, 62-year-old man, I'm talking about beings as a child at bottom of the bed that changed into images from a wedding album. How can you put that over to somebody who just sits watching TV soaps? How do you educate the populace?
Well, this is the way we approach it. I used to argue with people. Now I just, we can reach who we can reach. That's who we're looking for. We're just looking for those that can respond and can feel the truth of this, right? You can feel the truth of what I'm saying, because it's how nature works. It is always how nature works. The higher preys on the lower, the stronger prey on the weaker. Okay, it's not, but so we just have to, let the other ones do their thing. And I get it. It's frustrating. I mean, I've been laughed at, I've been mocked. And it's funny though, when they do that, they say, "Oh, I think it's just wishful thinking." That's what they'll say to me. And I'm like, no, I know what happens when Native people get discovered. This is not wishful thinking on my part. I would much prefer they weren't here. So, and I could see them switch, right? And then also, I don't think I've mentioned it on here, I was married to an astrophysicist, right, who was more convinced of the reality of UFOs than I was for a long time. He had, crop circles in particular interested him because the structure of the plant had changed. They had been heated. And he'd actually done reverse engineering on craft that he said, or not craft, but a piece of a craft. This was how they do it. They compartmentalize it. And he said there was absolutely no way that technology came from Earth. Okay. He was in the DOD. He was he worked on space shuttles and flying laser labs and that sort of thing. He took the subject seriously as a scientist. So, and there are, like, a wonderful friend named Ted Rowe is working on something called UAP Med, where he's drawing in professionals to help people who are experiencing abductions, and professionals that are taking the subject seriously. But I agree with you. There are those that just want to be in the newspaper. They want the attention. They want fame. I can't imagine why. I can't think of anything worse. But and it's a cash cow for some.
Yeah, well, absolutely. And when I published Night People, Whitley Strieber said to me, "Are you sure?" He said, "Are you sure you want to do it?" He said, "Because once you've kind of bared your soul and said all this, you can't reverse it." And for me personally, I've gone beyond. These things have happened, so I'm not going to lie to myself just to please other people. That's how I look at it.
And people think I'm from another planet, but what else is new? I have to. My soul tells me I got to do this. Yeah, I do this because the future of humanity is at stake. The freedom, the self-determination, our sovereignty, our art, our creativity, our love for each other, our love for animals, all of that is at stake if we don't get this right. And I'm sorry, you can make fun of me all you want to. You can tell me I don't care. That's why I do this. And it's no other reason. I don't make a penny on it. I give stuff away because I just want to get the word out there. That is my only motivation, is because I got to live with myself. If I know this, if I know it within myself that this is real and this is happening, it is my obligation to help other people understand it. Period.
Okay,
End of.
I've got another question, LaRae, from Scotch Mist. Other planets with a suitable atmosphere in which sample plants and stroke animals from here would surely have developed their own life forms. Other plants with a suitable.
Okay. Oh, sure. One of the things the new message and the Allies reveals is that life out there, the universe is heaving with intelligent life, heaving billions and billions of races of beings with their own culture. Life evolved there, but a lot of places in the universe had to be colonized, when they ran out of resources on their own world. And most of them, interestingly, live underground. Unlike us, they don't live in a hospitable environment. But yeah, there is life out there in every stage of evolution, behind us, way ahead of us. The ones I'm interested in, though, are those that have maintained their freedom and their self-determination and have maintained that spirituality, because this is a universal spirituality that I'm talking about. This is practiced in its form throughout the universe. So that's what we have, so much we're capable of, that we just have to get through this stage of our evolution and keep that alive and grow and expand, because Marshall's work goes into a lot of stuff that we would think is science fiction, but there's demonstrations through what he's done that it's actually real. We have that potential within us. That's generations. That's a long time in the future. I just don't want that potential to die.
And I kind of got a follow-up question from Scotch Mist, who's saying, well, the period that these samples have been taken, it's over a long, tens of years.
They were here before we were. There was space travel before we were here.
So I guess what Scotch Mist, why aren't they up and running with their own life forms? By after all these years.
Well, they are, but life still has to be sustained. I ate a steak when I was 10, but I got to eat another one if I want to survive.
Good point.
Sorry.
Okay.
For life to continue, it still requires more and more and more resources.
Yeah.
And this planet is worth a fortune on those trade routes. It's worth a fortune because there's greedy beings out there too that want to expand their empire. They, forgive me, and I know I'm an American saying this, but they are the beings that are behind what's happening here. They're, they want to expand their empire just like Britain did.
Okay. Okay. And Mason Lawson, I am a committed Roman Catholic with an interest in the universe. Have you encountered messages that reflect an understanding of religion or divine creation from non-human intelligences?
Oh, that's a great question, Mason. Thank you for that one. Thank you. Okay, so we're gonna, like, allies is all about, these are spiritual beings that have advanced in spirituality. So yes, it's Marshall's work, as I say, if my interpretation is correct, everything I can discern really is from an angelic source. All right. So the beauty of this work is that it honors and acknowledges all of the faiths in our world, that everything that's true in our world's religions is true in this. Okay. And there is a tremendous amount of information about the goodness of spirituality when you take out all the controlling aspects. So yeah, there's tons of it. And again, it took me time to really think this was angelic. I didn't believe that, but I grew up in a very fundamentalist Christian household with the most devout Christ-like father you could imagine. My father was such a man of conscience and principle and ethics. And Marshall is the only person I've ever met that outdoes my father in those terms. But yes, there's tons of information in the new message, everything you'd want to know about the understanding of how, you know, religion operates. Yeah, there's a great book actually called The One God and the Pure Religion. You might want to look those up. Those are free. I normally stick to allies, but you asked a great question, so thank you for that.
So there's the word God. Then I'm not, obviously I don't think you're going to have answer to this. I have no idea, but is there still one overriding all enduring power in the universe in your message, and it's God?
Yes, and it's absolutely beautiful, because I spent my life trying to get away from religion. I really couldn't stand it. I was seeing through the contradictions and the hypocrisy in Sunday school. It was driving me nuts. Okay, but we learned that the God that humanity has, first of all, there's a lot of inaccuracies about what, you know, the Bible has said about God. You know, there's no anger, there's no fear, there's no hell, there's none of that. So it corrects that. But yes, the God that we have worshipped or praised here on earth is the one God for the entire universe. In fact, it describes in one of the chapters that God is the Lord of 1 trillion universes. So yeah, it confirms everything that's true, you know, in all of our religions, and we honor all of them. We honor all of them.
So okay then. So without, sorry, Les, I know you've got a question lined up. So without, but just to expand on this a bit. So without naming any religions, you know, because I'm not really for or against.
It's okay. You don't have to be. You don't have. You can be an atheist. You can be an atheist. It's okay. None of it matters. That's okay. You don't believe anything.
What I'm saying is, the certain aspects of religion, are they steering us down the wrong path, then away from this message that you're giving?
Oh yeah. Anything that condemns others, anything they refer to any violence in the name of God as an what's the word? Abomination. God doesn't have any preferences over any group of people, whether it's here or whether it's out in the universe. It also talks about how we will all make it back. You know, nobody's going to hell. It goes in. There's a great chapter called "What Happens After Death" that goes into that one. But yeah, it's a universal thing, and the way God is, you know, the way, because I tell you, I really can't stand religions, but the way we understand, like if you experience the desire to give unselfishly, if you pick up a worm and you put it back in the ground, if you give something just for the sake of it, that's how goodness, that's how God comes into the world, is through our actions. Okay. And when you experience a resonance, and I think you and I have experienced that, Paul, because we've always been on the same page. We experience that connection, not in any, you know, funny stuff, but we get each other. Yeah. Okay. That's really how God is. There's no church. You don't need to go to church. You're better off in nature. There's no rules. There's only guidelines. And this, it really does. It heals you from the inside out without all of the doctrine and the dogma and the. Yeah. I used to say I was beaten up with Jesus when I was a kid. It was brutal. It's beautiful stuff without the heaviness of religion.
Yeah. That's beautifully put. Go on then, Les.
Okay. Yeah, Karen has got a question. Welcome to the show, Karen. LaRae, is the picture on the wall behind you part of your protection in this life? And I'm loving your earrings. Thank you.
Actually, no. That picture, my husband painted that picture, and it's interesting. That's you notice that the names of those. My husband's. We saw paintings very similar to that in New Mexico, and we really loved them, and didn't have the money to purchase them. So my husband came home and painted them himself, and they're actually referred to as spirit warriors. So while I don't look at it as protection, I think I think it works. I think it works. And thank you on the earrings. I haven't worn these in years. Thank you.
Okay, and Stephen Collins is going, LaRae, can you tell us then who are the good guys and who are the bad guys out of the races out there?
Okay. Great question. Great question. Okay, so one of the things the Allies explain is that any potential friends that we did have that were coming here, okay, when the intervention arrived, they left. All right, so any of our future potential friends left so that we would have an unambiguous situation. And they describe the collectives here, because we've got various races of beings. They're named in Jacob's works. We don't really name them here. But the ones that are here are all here for their own benefit, whether it's the reptilians or the whoever, the Palladians, so even though we're getting a lot of these promises from these beings, Bashar, oh golly, he scares me. All of them that are here for themselves. Okay, so we haven't, and then the Allies, real friends, do not come and interfere. The Allies shared their wisdom. They don't want anything from us. It's hopeful that we will get to keep our sovereignty and in the future be able to interact with other free worlds, but we're not ready for that. So those of us that are here now, there's all sorts of races that exist out there. And from now on, we are going to be dealing with beings that will want this planet for themselves. And we have to learn to defend ourselves. And the three things we have to do that are unity, discretion, stop broadcasting into space. For God's sake, they know everything about us. We've been broadcasting for 100 years. We've got to do that. And we have to maintain our self-sufficiency. So we can't accept any trinkets from space. But
just like an indigenous tribe would
accept. Yeah. Exactly. One of the problems with these beautiful people that we eventually colonized, they were hospitable to strangers, whether it was, or Montezuma was curious about Cortez. The West Coast of Africa asked the Portuguese to help them settle an argument that should have been settled amongst themselves, and that began the slave trade. Okay, and these beings will do this slowly over time because they do not want us to fight back. This is art of war we're dealing with. The best way to win over an enemy is to get them to not fight, which is why they work so hard at pushing the ascension and the 5D. But yeah, there's all sorts of types of races out there. But those that want to maintain their freedom and their sovereignty, they keep to themselves so that they can evolve. And there are some extremely beautifully advanced races out there that have managed to really develop this spirituality that I'm talking about to a very high degree. What they can do, what they can do is unbelievable. But we have to start somewhere, and that's what I talk about. I hope I answered that.
I think so.
Does that answer who the good guys and who the bad guys are? Because the Allies are not coming here taking people.
Yeah, comprehensive in my book, LaRae. And Zeno is asking, heard they're directing the Illuminati since the Greater Treaty of 54, looking to convert us into quantum consciousness using their AI Neuralink, ? They're already looking to control us via implants.
To be honest with you, I don't follow Illuminati, but I just think of it, if there is an Illuminati, I think of them as the economic powerhouses, I always say they'd sell their grandmothers for more money and more power. I don't know anything about treaties. They say that convert us to quantum consciousness. That to me is their false promises. Because we have everything we need within us that is capable of amazing things. It just simply has to be developed. So what we have, we've already got, right? We just have to develop that consciousness. I don't know anything about AI Neuralinks, but nothing surprises me with these guys.
No,
They are heartless, and they can control people. So, but I'm sorry, I don't know any more than that.
No, thank you.
Thanks for the question, Zeno. Always good to hear from you on the stream. I got a question now from Studio 211 Productions. I know you've just covered the first part from another question, LaRae, but LaRae, where are they from and what do they resemble? Are they in our human form, and how do they get introduced to governments? Do they communicate by conventional means?
Wow.
Just before you answer that, he must be reading my mind, because
have you got that wrote down, Paul?
Yeah, just not exactly word for word, but that was what I was going to ask actually afterwards. So yeah, let's run with it. Yeah.
Wow, that's really, you guys are great. I mean, you two are great, but the people asking the questions, really good questions. Okay, where are they from? Okay, so the collectives that we're dealing with are from our local galaxy, and they're being controlled by beings that we will never see, that actually breed them for the very purposes. That's what they use a lot of our DNA for, is to breed new life forms. And so that's where some of them come from. They're our local galaxy, our local mafia. But groups like this, it's like, just think of it sort of like we have Russian and Chinese and Italian mafias. There's groups like that scattered throughout the universe, like black markets and things like that. What do they resemble? All right, so from what I understand with Jacob's work, you have the tall whites, you have the grays, you have the mantids, you have the reptilians. What else? I don't know. Jacob's book. If you look at Walking Among Us, if you get that book, you could get that on a free PDF. There's a list in the back that goes into them. But unfortunately, what's happened now is because they have perfected their hybrid breeding program, they look like us. But you can, now I don't know that I've ever met one, but you can apparently learn to sense them. So so some of them look like us, but the ones that are behind the scenes, they stay on their ships pretty much, so we don't see them. Are they in our human form? Some of them, yes, they look like us, and they're loyal to the aliens. How do they get introduced to governments? Well, if you go back to the 50s, with Roswell, allegedly they captured some alive, according to Philip Corso. And deals were done behind the scenes. If the story about Eisenhower is correct, they've infiltrated the military. There's a really spooky PDF about a lot of them in the military. So do they communicate by conventional means? The ones that look like us will, but the ones that live on the ships, those are telepathic. They communicate via telepathy. But I assume that the hybrids would speak like we do. It's because they're trying to pass as us, and that's what Jacob's work goes into. They're trying to supplant us.
Oh, thank you.
And this kind of leads me into your experience, Paul, with somebody called, you label as Spam Man. And well, would this person that you encountered or being, would he fall into this category of somebody who was not human?
Well, I'll never know, will I, Les, whether this man, that's what he looked like, were human or not human. Strangest person I've ever met, probably apart from the ticks that we talked about in Night People. But basically, I don't think you know about this, LaRae, and we'll keep it brief because it
wasn't the one with the bicycle.
Yeah. Oh, you do. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, and all he couldn't stop telling me I was bringing down the light, and you've got to stop doing what you're doing. You know what you're doing. You're bringing down the light, and spooky thing. And we'll not go into the story, guys. If anybody does want to hear about this, we'll do it on Sunday. But spookiest thing, when I came back from having the phone unlocked, he's at the other side of the road with his back to us, and before we even got to him, and he'd then put a jumper on. He'd had his shirt off before. That's why I call him Spam Man. He'd got the physique of an action man, but the no vascularity. There was nothing. It was just everything was there. It was just like he was molded. But anyway, He'd got a brown crew neck jumper on, tight fitting. I knew it were him. And he just turned straight round and he just set off again, before we'd even reached him. And it's so odd. It's oddest conversation and quirky thing. I'd not met Les then. Me and Les didn't know each other, or Les might have looked at what I was doing, but we'd not met. And there were a young fella who Les had done a bit of filming with. We don't have to say his name, Les, do we? But Les had done a bit of filming with this young fella from Speeton, I think it was, weren't it? Speeton, Buckton.
Yeah.
And he'd already contacted me, this young lad. I don't know how old he'd have been, Les. You'd tell me. 16,
when he contacted you, probably 15 or something.
15. His mum and dad were aware. And they'd got the police because somebody had apprehended this young lad. And from all accounts, from what I'm told, it sounded exactly like him. And all this bloke could tell him was that there were things coming from the sky. There's aliens coming from the sky. And this is just on I'll say a deserted road, because we know where we are on that Buckton to Speeton road. There's nothing on it. And that's where this young lad used to happen to live, or in close proximity. We'll not set exact location. But even that's a weird coincidence that Les knew him. He'd done a bit of filming with him, hadn't you? But
yeah.
None of that's going to make sense to bulk up people that have not heard this story. So if you want to know about that, we'll do it on Sunday. But
sure. Okay. Are you ready for another question, LaRae?
Of course.
Right then. We're going to hit you with when I can get myself lined up. There we go. Scotch Mist. If humans are so weak-willed, why would any alien race want our DNA?
Okay, DNA is DNA, and one of the things that it's not so much that we're weak-willed. We're actually a very strong race. Somebody comes after our freedom, man, we fight back, and that's one of the reasons. So many people say, they're always saying, if they wanted the planet, they could have had it by now. They would have attacked by now. It's like, no, because they know we're violent and we would fight back. They want our DNA to produce new life forms, and if you read Carla Turner's Taken, you will come across some really horrific combinations of beings that they combined. And DNA is very, very valuable. And if you think about it, people think, well, I remember so many people said, well, they could just create whatever they want, right? Because they could just take DNA and clone the same DNA. But if you look at nature, you need the diversity, you need the mixture of combinations. Like if with cousins marry, there's a very high chance that there could be some sort of imperfection, right? So they need variety. And this isn't just our DNA. Elephants, giraffes, look, how many animals have you seen, Paul, where they've taken stuff out of? So you think about what billions of animals we have on this planet, and us, 8 billion of us. So they're going to get a huge variety of DNA to do whatever they do with it. Okay. I hope that answers it.
Yeah, and just to add to that, and for the people who don't know the story, but I'll tell you as well, LaRae, is that when I did meet up with Paul in the early days, we decided to do some filming treks across 2 fields. One had a bullet what had escaped from a few miles away, and we was very wary. But on the second field that we entered, there was no sheep or animals in there. But over the grassy mound, as it mounds, I could see some sheep's wool, and I said, maybe we should have a look at over there, Paul. We walked over there to find a carcass of kind of a fresh sheep. It was completely headless, and there was no blood.
That's them.
And obviously, Les is right with what he's just said there, exactly. But just to elaborate on it and make it sound, we don't want to paint a picture, but you've got to know what we're looking at. Obviously, the wool on a sheep comes to just the back of their ears. That's, it don't fill the face up. But this, you could, like a paint roller, you could pull the wool that had gone to the back of their ears. And I know it sounds macabre, people, but that's the truth of it. And look down, and it had been taken right down to where the breastbone would start. Everything had gone. and that's all that had been taken, Les, wasn't it? You know, it's a
yeah. And how fresh would you say that was, Paul?
Well, it was fresh because I were up there 3 or 4 days a week at 4:30 in the morning because this farmer were losing these animals, and so I'd have only been up there probably the day before or 2 days before because he used to do days I didn't do, and as I say, it was Les's first trip onto it.
And it was adjacent to a public footpath, but not a very well trod footpath. There was a more busy footpath. They were a few hundred yards away, one day on the coast.
And if it were the work of people, well, obviously.
Well, they had that happen in our village when I lived in Wales. They had some sheep that had happened to. That's happening, you know, all over the world. And what people don't realize, Butch Patowski studied a lot of those carcasses. So did Barbara Bartholic, who was the hypnotist behind Carla Turner. And what a lot of people don't know is those poor things are alive when they're doing these things to them. There was a horse that had its eyes removed, and it was alert. And when they do the autopsies on the brain, it was just full of hematomas, which is what happens when the body can't take the pain. And he equated it to being run over slowly by a steamroller. Right. So this is a cruelty on a level we can't even imagine.
Yeah, well,
and yet there's apologies for it. So what do you do?
Well, I realise we've kind of gone down a dark road today, but I just want to add to that. I visited a farmer just on outskirts of Bridlington about a UFO sighting, and he kept sheep, and we were talking. He was talking about all sorts of things, and he knew the farmer whose sheep who were suffering fatalities. Let's put it that way. So we got talking. He said he had one, and he pointed to the field, and he described there's a slight mound on field, a mound of earth that's clean cropped. He says, and my sheep were in opposite field. He said, and fences about 3 foot high with a strip of barbed wire across top. So I came out one morning. He says, and it's real sort of typical sort of Yorkshire bloke. His sheep don't jump, they don't jump the fences that high. He says, and I looked, and it's on that mound of earth. He says, and all my other sheep are in field, and I'm thinking, you got in there, and I can see it, and it's laid down. And he says, but there's like a pool of slurry around it, natural slurry, like, you know, sludge.
Sure.
There's been a bit of rain. He said, so I wade up to this in my Wellingtons, and this sheep's in a terrible state, and it's alive, less its eyes. So. So what you're saying, so the vet, sorry about this, people, but
I understand.
The vet comes, and the police come, and he's trying to explain to him. He says, where's the footprints? He said, there's only mine there. And he could never work that one out. He said, it's as though it's been lifted out of field and put there. He said there were a big area, not just like a little 3-foot strip, big area of slurry around this. He said, where's the footprints? He said, there's only mine there. And it was taken away, and there's a little bit more to it, but that will stop at that, I think. Yeah,
and there's cases like that, you know, all over the world, which to me confirms what the Allies say about them wanting biological materials. It's a confirmation, and you know, and that's how I've gone about putting this all together.
Okay.
So that poor thing.
Absolutely.
I just.
Okay, I've got a question from Auntie Moore. Hello, LaRae. Really interested in listening to you tonight. What are your thoughts on the alien ancestors theory?
Oh, thank you, Auntie Mo. That's very kind. Auntie Mo, excuse me. I was going to say it the American way there. Yeah. Thank you. So what they do, to my understanding, they are trying to use anything they can to lay claim to humanity, right? So you have Mary Rodwell talking about there being family. I do have a little bit of an interesting point. So these beings are not connected with us in any way. However, all of that said, I will tell you that in the book, I think it's in Life in the Universe, it does say that many millennia ago, there was a benevolent race that bred with humanity way back when. And that is what took us. That's basically Darwin's missing link. But they didn't stay. That was just to increase our intelligence. They didn't stay. They didn't, it was just to help us out. But that was so long ago. So yes, we do have a bit, but that was to help us in our evolution. But these beings that we have now are not connected to us in any way. But boy, they are doing anything they can, because people have to be so careful with this. If we say, oh yeah, because Mary Broadwell's literally going, oh yes, they're family. No, they're not. But we would give them citizenship. And this is why so many people, and that's why so many people are claiming, oh, they've always been here. Oh, this may not be our world. And they could keep that confusion going. And also, they are trying to turn us against humanity. And I get it. We certainly have our problems. But we also, if you look at what goes viral, it's usually people being kind to each other or to animals. So, we've still got all of that love within us. But the turning people against or the ancient ancestors, yeah, like I say, there is a smidgen of truth in that, according to my understanding. Got to keep saying that.
Do you think
some they're not our friends?
Obviously, I don't know any, and I don't think you do. But do you think some people are placed there just to spread the word of enlightenment and these angelic type beings?
Oh, sure. They have their human apologists. They've made deals with some of them. I personally consider Stephen Greer a recruiter for them. I mean, anybody that actively encourages CE5, oh my God, when these beings get a hold of you, because I know so many abductees that they either did CE5 or they invited aliens in, but once they're in, man, they don't let go. And you might seem okay if you don't go against them. You go against them, they will, like you were describing, Paul, in your book about some of your really nasty dreams. That's one of the things they do. They sort of attack you psychically at night, especially if you speak out against them. But see, CE5 is encouraging people to have their brains taken over, as far as I'm concerned. And you've got the Bledsoes, you've got a lot of humans that have been recruited to bring more people in. And then, of course, because we can't distinguish between what's an alien and what's spiritual yet, we have the ability, but that takes time to learn. I mean, we have it within us. We got to learn it.
But could it not be that they've been given a message and they're not doing it deliberately? They may have been, just like Marshall's been given a message and a calling, and you have.
I do think some of the, but the thing is, Greer knows better. Greer knows better. He knows that they're not benevolent, and yet he keeps saying it. I do think there are people sincere. I do. I think, but the closer people get to it, the more their mind can be taken over. You can have a really horrible experience at first, and then over time, oh yeah, well, it's all been for the good. Like you said about Travis Walton. Yeah. The more people are exposed to them, the more control they can gain over them.
Okay, thank you. Go on, let's have another.
Yeah, we've got plenty of questions.
Are you okay with questions, LaRae?
Yeah,
I love it. It helps me. It helps me keep on track.
Zeno again. Archaeology is uncovering more and more evidence that we're not the first civilization, but likely the sixth. And there have been 5 resets. Sounds like crop yield rotation. Human equals best before 2033.
He's good, this fella, isn't he?
Yeah, that's okay. How do I answer that?
Well, I'm glad you're having to answer it, because I don't know how to answer it.
All right, humanity has had a variety of civilizations that have come and gone, risen and fallen, risen and fallen. So, modern man, we had all sorts, but I don't understand. So I don't understand what reset means.
Well, it says we're likely the 6th. There have been 5 resets.
I think it's simply
wiping the slate clean and starting again,
Oh, I don't know. I don't think we've ever been completely wiped out, but I think we have.
Not wiped out. Well, maybe let's start at scratch again, because
that
model
I
didn't
don't know.
work.
It doesn't say anything. It doesn't say anything like that in what I've studied. So I really am not qualified to speak on it. But I just look at the entirety of human evolution, and how many millions and millions of years it has taken. So I'm sorry, I apologize. I just don't know.
That's okay.
But I'm hoping that we will get to continue in our evolution, and we will get to develop these skills, because literally, if you become strong, I want to talk about this just for a second, and how it makes Marshall a bit different than a lot of the people here. Now, one of the things people say a lot is that, some are good, some are bad. Okay, well, according to the Allies, none of them that are good are here, and no truly beneficial race would interfere with us. We have a right to this planet. It's our planet, and so there's no good races here. Now, one of the things we learn in the Allies is that people, they think, yeah, there's some good here. Well, no way are these collectives that want this planet are going to let good entities here. And I can tell you a story about that. In 1985, the original set of allies tried to come, and they got discovered by these beings. Okay. And they had to self-destruct. 4 of them died trying to get this message to us. Obviously, the mission the remaining ones, the mission had to be abandoned. And it took another 14 years for them to get here. Now, this is something I think you'll relate to, Paul, as far as the telepathic communication. You will notice that there is endless amounts of positive channeled information from allegedly various aliens in the world, whether it's galactic, Palladians, Bashar, Arcturians, whoever. All right. But Allies is clearly warning us about who's here. Okay. Now, I told you Marshall had developed that spiritual ability, and he received the Allies through a spiritual channel. Now, you know well enough to know, Paul, how they can read minds. If there was another good guy out there trying to get good information to us, they are going to be on it like that. All right. Mm-hmm. And they're not going to let it get here. But what happened with the Allies, it was in the world before they knew about it, because they would have never allowed that communication to come through. But you see, this is where I haven't spoken enough about, is that spiritual part of ourselves cannot be manipulated by them, right? They cannot manipulate people that are strong with this internal power. We call it knowledge. So that's what our defense is going to be, because they can control our minds, but they can't control this deeper part of us. And this, I think Marshall's receiving the Allies, especially 4 times, because there's 4 Allies books from 1997. He received it on your wedding anniversary in 1997. And the last one came in 2016. I don't know if there'll be more, but that shows that spiritual power works, because there's no way, especially because Marshall's somebody they like to target because he's, speaking out against them.
So how many more people, men, women around the world have they targeted then?
What do you mean?
Well, Marshall's been given, maybe target's the wrong word. Marshall's been given the message.
Oh, they've not done it with any. They tried, or I think probably back in the 50s, but nobody could receive it. People weren't ready for it. But no, Marshall's the only one that's received it. They don't. Okay. The reason they do that is because if it comes through more than one person, it's going to get distorted. All right, and you're going to get lots of different versions, and then you're going to have crossover and that sort of thing. So when this kind of communication comes into the world, it comes through one person.
So it's not. But it's got to propagate. It's got to spread, because Marshall's not going to be here forever.
No, I realize that. Well, Marshall has given us the information. Okay, then it's up to us to develop that spiritual connection that we can get direct communication from genuine higher beings and learn to discern them from the ones that are here for themselves. Okay. So, but we're not going to get a major communication like Marshall did. That's not going to happen. But we will have genuine higher powers directing us, all right, from within us, all right, because that's our direct connection to it.
Okay.
You see what I mean? Does that make any sense?
Yeah.
So it's enough people developing that within themselves. That's what's going to keep it, keep us at least continuing to tick over in our evolution.
Right. Next question then.
Scotch missed again. Such a widespread hybrid conspiracy would have been exposed by now. If LaRae knows, people in the media would know by now, as well as others.
Yes, but you're dealing with people that can't deal with this information. The hybrid stuff has been talked about since the Bud Hopkins, the Max, and the Jacobs, but then it was gone away from, because as they became better at controlling minds, and then you've got to remember, a hybrid would be able to read the thoughts of anybody that tried to expose it and would change it. Okay. There may be people that are aware of that, but they ain't talking. They're not talking.
Terrifying concept, though, isn't it? When you think about it, that I don't mean this with sarcasm, Les, but Les could be an hybrid. I could, and we could all just be being deceived. But you could have married one. It's just.
Well, I think again, they're not that many. I mean, they're spreading. But they will lack a humanity. Okay, it's like they will lack
empathy,
that essence of the human. Okay, they will not have like that connection you and I share, or there's things they might be able to fake it, but they can't really do it. Do you know what I'm saying? Because it's not in them. I think you could equate them to psychopaths in that respect. Do you see how I'm saying that? So
they'd be aware, self-aware of what they are. If we could believe this, and I'm not saying you're wrong, LaRae, but they would be aware of what they are, would they?
Oh yeah, they know exactly why they're here, what they're doing. Everything is about the mission. I hope Chris O'Leary. This is where I've gotten this story from. Chris O'Leary, who'd be a great guy to have on your show, actually. Guy from New York, I think, artist. He was telling the story recently about how he was introduced to his hybrid son. I don't know when, quite a while ago, I imagine. And so, it's an awkward situation. The kid wanted to meet him, and this is on the ship. And so Chris said to him, "So what do you do for fun?" And the kid's like, "Fun?" So yeah. What kind of music do you like? And the aliens got him out of there, right? He had never been exposed to fun. He'd never been. So there's ways that we'll be able to sense they're a bit different,
right?
But yeah, but the trouble is, of course, is the ability to control our minds. That's the tricky bit. Make us forget them or whatever, because that's what happens to the people in Jacob's book.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, and just a little addendum from me in saying that you said these could be psychopaths and lacking in empathy, and maybe these people are in positions of power as of now, LaRae.
That is what we are led to believe, yes, but they stay behind the scenes. They stay behind the scenes. They generally are not seen in public, and of course they can influence somebody. I can't say it, but I do think there is one possibly in the current administration in America. I'm not going to say the name, but man, there's nothing human in that man. Nothing. There's just not. So I do wonder. But yeah, it does say that the hybrids are behind the scenes, and if they are successful at this takeover, they're going to be the ones in charge. And look how cold the world has become since they've been here. They're trying to stay. I mean, in America, they will pour bleach over perfectly good food for people who are trying to give homeless people food. right? That's not who we are. They're trying to kill off our best qualities: empathy, compassion. I have seen the changes in people that I have loved for many, many years. They got addicted to a certain news program, and I have watched them turn from these beautiful souls into these heartless, just nasty things that they wouldn't have done in a billion years when I knew them 40 years ago.
Yeah.
They're, people are starting to lose their humanity. And look at the divisions now between, the divisions now with what's going on with race and immigrants. And they're turning people against each other in any way they can. And it makes me sick. No, I'm not cooperating. No.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, let's try another question then.
We'll try another one, yeah. And always a good contributor to the show and a good friend of Truth Proof, Steve Collin. Paul, I'm 66 and relate to the time I met a gnome or a fey creature. If they don't believe me, then that's their opinion.
Yeah, Steve were brought up on a farm, just so out in the country, and he did tell me the time that he met or came into contact with what he's describing as a gnome or a fey. Where do elemental type beings fit into all this? Or are they in this equation?
They don't go into it. They don't go into it. And I would, I don't know anything about, and I have no doubt that you saw what you saw. I have no doubt. I would be suspicious though, perhaps because aliens can project images into your head. There's a story Ted Rice told me about a woman who thought she was having sex with Jesus. Jesus is a very popular character in these images that they can put into our heads. So I would wonder if the gnome that you saw, they could have scanned your mind for something familiar to you, like a fae or a gnome, and projected that to make you see that. Do you see what I mean? It could have been an alien because they're short, they're small. So do you see what I'm saying? I'm not denying that you saw it. I have no doubt about that. But they can take, like Paul had the experience with the wedding picture, they can take what's in your mind and make you see that instead of them. Okay, it's like a decoy mechanism.
What if you're being tricked?
Me?
Yeah, you, Marshall.
It could be, but the thing is, I'll put it this way. All my life, I was always looking for, like when I started looking for spirituality, very, very quickly it would become too shallow, and I would need something deeper and more exhaustive and that sort of thing. If I were being tricked, my body would tell me. I would not be here with conviction, with determination. And this is the interesting thing about, because I've seen every sort of scam out there, everything, you name it, I have seen it. And this is the first time in my entire life that it did what it said on the package. And, I know Marshall, I've met him many, many times. I've seen him genuinely listen and pay attention to the people that I find so annoying. Yeah. And he is so patient. And so if this had been, I wouldn't have been here for 9.5 years. I guarantee you that.
No, that's yep. Thank you. Have we any more questions? Because I don't want to jump away from what we're talking about, but I've noted you said
before we run out of time, Paul, we'll just go through a little of self promotion for yourself and
for LaRae and what LaRae's about. Okay, then the books, the Truth Proof books.
Oh no, we'll start with the.
we're starting with the Awakening. 17th of May. Myself, Camilla, Barry Fitzgerald, Nick and Sarah Kyle, Linny, Ian Linford, and Steve Mirror. Where Steve and Camilla and Barry are putting together this conference, the Awakening Conference, and I'll be speaking there. Looking forward to it. It'll be a good event, I think, and a nice collective for people, like-minded people, to just get together and share information. So, you're coming, Les, aren't you? So,
open with a good following wind, I'll be there. Yeah.
Absolutely. And the books, they're available on truthproof.uk. And they're also available on Amazon as Kindle downloads. But the paperbacks, truthproof.uk. If you're an overseas customer, visit the link on the eBay link that's on the web page as well, because obviously I can send them through global shipping. The DVD, that's myself and Les's DVD, Wolflands, that's available on Amazon Prime as a download, or you can buy the hard copy of the DVD via truthproof.uk or on eBay if you're an overseas customer. So I think that's just about covered it, I think, Les, and thank you. And what about LaRae? Where can we find out about your work?
Okay, you can read all of the Allies of Humanity books at alliesofhumanity.org. All right, so that's there. And if you want to know a bit more about everything, life in the universe, that's the one I want. What life in the universe is really like instead of what we imagine it to be like. This is available at newmessage.org, free, completely free, no strings, no email, no nothing, no firewall. And there is a lot more where this comes from. Another book I recommend, that's again free. And oh, by the way, the voice that speaks through Marshall is all been recorded, and on many of these you can download the actual voice that is speaking through Marshall as he received this. I have downloaded hundreds of them. This is another book. This one is, they don't have this one in the audio, but Preparing for the Greater Community. And this talks about the mental environment and how to become stronger in our minds and so forth. Gives a whole lot of information. It's just beautiful. Not for everybody, I'm first to say that, but if you're interested, again, it's at newmessage.org.
And tell you what I like about this, seriously, is the fact that if this was some kind of, I don't know, money-making racket, which it isn't, it's the total opposite. LaRae's giving this knowledge away and giving the books away. So that's giving you, whether you agree with her or believe her or don't believe her, this is LaRae's conviction to what she's involved in and what she believes. To the fact where you're giving this material away. So there's not many.
Yeah, I buy a lot of them myself, and I've left hundreds in services, and I've given them to people when I was working. As you know, Paul, I've been at like 17 conferences, and every single one I was giving them away. And that to me, and also the new message, it's a not-for-profit organization. Nobody is getting rich. It runs on a shoestring. It's a tiny little office building behind a bus depot. I think there's maybe 2-3 employees. There's not, and the rest are volunteers. People do this because they feel called to do it. So
it's important to note, because no matter what people think, there's nobody making a profit out of this, and that's admirable.
I mean, they do obviously sell books online. They do. Yeah. But you know what it's like to have to pay for the printing and the covers. But the fact that they make all of the material for free, and the fact that I've given away, at least 3,000, plus they send them free to prisons, to you name it. I mean, again, the whole point is to get it out there, let people experience it, and if they resonate with it, run with it.
Thank you.
That's it.
Just before you get to a question, Les, unless you've got one lined up you want to ask.
No, you fire away, Paul. You second one. Yeah.
Appalachia, that's where you said you originate from. Is that correct? Mm-hmm. This is totally off the wall. Bigfoot. What are your views? Because obviously that's a location where people have cryptid sightings.
Yeah. Well, I'm convinced of the reality of Bigfoot. They don't go into any of that in the new message, but Mothman.
On a personal scale, like growing up there, and did you?
I didn't have any encounters like that. I did. I didn't experience anything that I think was alien. To my knowledge, I didn't experience anything that was alien related until I lived here, and that was about 2012. I grew up in Lake City. But as far as Bigfoot's concerned, I'm convinced that he's real. But I get the impression, according to Ted Rice, because Ted Rice used to see these cryptids on ships, you know, the man in the middle of Masquerade of Angels. And he said, he told me personally that he saw one on a spaceship. I personally think these beings come down here to feed, and then they get taken off again. But I do think they're real. I do think they're real. Too many people have seen them.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Wolflands, there's not just about the sort of dogman stroke werewolf phenomena. We've got cryptids of all types sort of covered in Wolflands. So yeah,
I'll have to get that too. I got, the trouble is with this subject is there's just so many mountains of material. You know, I mean, the new message on its own is 10,000 pages.
Right.
And one person has transcribed all of that from voice to text.
A lot of work.
You can do that in Chat GPT now, LaRae.
Well, you can now, but you couldn't in the 1980s.
No. So Les, we've got 10 minutes. Have we any more questions? Because you will get paid if not. And thank you, LaRae.
Pendle Hill UFOs. Question: when I asked an alien I once met, is there if there was evil, its reply was evil is a human concept. Have you got any thoughts on that, LaRae?
Yes, I do. In the book, The Greater Community, Wisdom from the Greater Community, there's a wonderful chapter on the forces of dissonance. All right. So yes, evil does exist. It can't, because we're all here in this separated state, evil is inevitable because life here is difficult. Everybody is trying to survive, but there isn't one source of it. Okay. And there are beings from the other side of life that work against life. And one of the things that I would like to say about evil is evil loves attention. And it's very, very seductive. But yeah, it absolutely exists. In fact, I've had friends that have experienced some quite nasty experiences with them. I saw, Paul, in your book that you had made a Ouija board. Oh man, I wouldn't go near one of those things for all my money in the world.
I made it for someone, actually. They asked me to make one, yeah.
But no, it isn't just a human concept. It's something that exists both in, well, you know, what these beings are doing, they don't see it as evil, but we do. You know, if you look at what they're actually doing, they just, you know, they're out for their own survival. They think they're, you know, doing a good thing. But no, evil does exist without a doubt. It can't help it. But there's no like devil or Satan. It's just there are souls that get stuck actually on the other side of life that are, and that could be a lot of the sources of it. So yeah,
like, I don't mean challenge that, but Marshall's had visitation, got a message that's angelic. Yeah. So if we've got angels, why can't we have demons?
I didn't say we didn't. We call them forces of dissonance.
What
in what I study?
I've missed that. You said I can't remember the exact wording. I thought it implied.
Yeah, we don't use the term devil or Satan.
That's it. Yeah.
But we call them forces of dissonance. They're forces of darkness. Yeah. Oh, they exist. And the intervention that we're dealing with is a result of those dark forces. You know, there are forces out there that serve unseen dark forces. All right. So that's, but no, it's not just a human concept in my view, you know, but, you know, I don't know who the alien was that you were speaking to.
Write that down, you know, evil loves attention. I thought, yes, that's great. Is that line?
Yeah, except the thing is with evil, how many times have we seen, I think a good case is in Nicaragua, the freedom fighters in Nicaragua, Daniel Ortega was his name, was it? He has now become a dictator. Okay, so he's fighting evil. He thinks he's fighting evil in the beginning, but it's very seductive, and it will get you working for it. Yeah. And that's why we need this deeper power within us to prevent that from happening, because it's not hard for people to go down those roads.
Okay.
Because life is difficult.
We might have one question. Have we got time, Les? Yeah.
Tony D. Hi, everyone. What's your thoughts about the UK government giving permission in doing sun dimming experiments, playing at being God? There's a movement to stop this and sign a petition.
I think
I don't know anything about it, so I will leave it to you two.
No, well, I don't know lots about it myself. Are they talking about spraying the atmosphere to dim down the sun? It's been in news, hasn't it? But sorry, Tony.
Yeah, well,
apologies, sir. I don't watch the news very much.
Well, I think, yeah, well, I don't know much about it, except you can assume that what they're spraying in the air is some sort of chemical, which can't be good for humanity. That's all I can say on that.
No.
Yeah, okay. I tend to, I don't know, I would, yeah, probably, but I tend to stay away. Believe, it's so funny. I sit here and talk about all this stuff, but I don't go down the conspiracy theory route.
No, I don't think it is I think what
Tony's I think it's really happening. Yeah. I think it's really happening, but I don't know enough about to comment.
To do sun dimming experiments with spraying the atmosphere to deflect the sun rays from excessive heating of the UK.
Yeah.
Excessive, well, given that it's this temperature in May, I can see why they're trying to do something. My husband was also a climate scientist. He was obsessed with global warming.
Yeah, I'm obsessed with it. Look, I've just been in the sun a bit too much today. But yeah, go on, lads.
Zeno, back on again. I've noticed modern times seems to be following the scripture of prophecy in relation to every religion on earth. Red Heifers, New Temple, Pope's death, end times are the only simulation parameters. Are they the only simulation parameters? Is that what you're saying?
Well, this is why, Zeno, you're going to have to come on here and then you can explain a few of these things. Because the workings of these questions require a little bit more than 3 minutes.
Yeah, I don't know which scripture of prophecy you are. Oh, if you mean like of all the religions. Yeah, that I don't know, but we have a lot of prophecy in the new message about what's coming with climate change and aliens. This is another free book, The Great Waves of Change, about how difficult life's going to be, as time goes on. And, we're going to have to come together as a people. But yeah, I'm sorry, I don't know.
Okay. Stephen Collin, LaRae, would you think it's a good idea to try and contact these races individually or not?
No.
Well, how do you? Yeah, but the thing is, LaRae, and Steve as well, and everybody, how do you contact them? Because it seems to be they contact us, don't they?
Oh, it's actually more. It's easier than you think. I know a lot of people. It's actually through meditation. They do it through CE5, and they can hear your thoughts. But the reason I say no is because of the way they can take over your mind completely. You can't have, like, I think Danny Sheehan talks about having a diplomatic discussion. You cannot. They will simply take over your mind. They will put thoughts in your mind, and they'll take you over. My best advice is to do all you can to protect yourself from them. And not go there, because I know too many people that have, and they cannot get rid of them. They get their brain changed. They get these psychic attacks. There's something called the love bite, where if they can't get to you directly, right? Because if you're strong in your practice, you're harder to get to, like I am. It's not to say I'm immune. I'm not. But I know someone whose son wasn't as strong as his father, who does like I do. He speaks out against them. And they do something called the love bite. They get you obsessed with someone you couldn't possibly have a real relationship with. It's very difficult. And this poor kid went from a really promising, about to graduate with a degree in psychology, and he's now, he's been hooked on drugs. He's been in jail. He's schizophrenic. That is what they can do to you. And sometimes they do that to people who won't cooperate with them. So they go after somebody to love. But because I don't have that problem, there's not really anybody near me that they can get to.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and I think Karen Bierman gets the last comment on tonight's show. LaRae, thank you for a wonderful, insightful evening. You're a breath of fresh air. Much love and blessings to you moving forward.
Thank you, Karen.
Oh, thank you, Karen. That is so kind of you. I'm glad I haven't made a complete tit of myself, which was what I was afraid I was going to do. But I do want everybody to know that we have the power to get rid of them. We have to, the reason we can get rid of them is they're not allowed to. The reason they are so secretive is because we have to look like we accept them here, right? They have to make it look like we want them here. So if we don't protest, if we don't put up a stink, it doesn't send the message to the powers that be that we don't want them. And that's eventually, I want to see protests on the street like we've seen recently, with humanity telling them, no, this is our world, beggar off.
LaRae,
so we do have the power to get rid of them.
On that note, I'm going to go and wish you a great night, and thank you for giving us 2 hours of your time. Thanks everybody for listening. Thank you, Les, and it's been a pleasure speaking with you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Paul and Les, and thank you everybody for your patience and your kindness. I really appreciate it.
And I'll just add to that, thank you to our two moderators tonight, Alison and Lee, and thanks for the super chat donations, always very welcome. And as I said at the top of the show, we've reached over 14,000 subscribers. Thank you very, very much.
And we'll press like and subscribe.
Press like and subscribe on this one, and we'll see you all on Sunday. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.